Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and Michael, I'm really excited to tell you I found a theme for today's show.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, of course
Yeah.
we always have themes because we're a professional podcast and we plan for things way ahead of time.
Professional podcast. So this is, we did a great thing finally watching these movies.
Mm-hmm.
That was really the only reason I needed, is just I want to watch Shame and I want to watch I Saw the Devil.
Is that the theme? That's a horrible theme.
Well, it would have been a horrible theme, but I think there is a question to consider on today's show, and that is two sides of the same coin.
Ooh, that's
yeah,
really
right.
good. I
We
like
got a little
that.
bit of that going.
I like
and
that.
there's,
Yeah, big time.
So that's something that may or may not be true in either film, but definitely going to come up in a big way in our conversation on both. So that's going to involve spoiling the movies.
Yeah, we got to spoil them.
For people who've never heard this show before. They can use the chapters, which is a feature we have, to skip over the movie they haven't seen. Other thing I did want to mention before we get into Shame. Shame's the first movie. What's the second movie?
The second movie is I Saw the Devil.
We're on our 600th episode of Double Feature, and I still don't know how we do this. Shame and I Saw the Devil. Yeah, that's
okay. This is episode 600?
Episode 600. Welcome. You've made it.
Cool.
I wanted to mention our Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have one yet.
Nope.
We're going to have more details about why we're doing a Kickstarter, what the incentives are. But for the last time, you as an audience member can have some influence on what those incentives are going to be. So send us an email, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com, and let us know if you're going to make a pledge to Kickstarter, what do you want to get out of it? Besides a chance to pick some movies for our show. I know everybody wants that.
Right.
We figured that into the equation. That's before Kickstarter was even invented.
There's also
that part out.
There's a lot of people that want to see us naked.
Doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. Apparently. I'll show you if you show me. Let's talk about Shame.
I think it's a good time for that.
Wow. The first natural segue in a million episodes of the show. So the poster is what lured me into Shame. Of so many movies we do.
Poster.
Yeah, there's two different posters. I don't know if you've seen these actually.
I've seen one that's red and blue.
Okay, I'm talking about, so there's one with the sheets, which is kind of interesting. It says Shame, it shows some bed sheets. It's an interesting poster. Definite, association immediately. But there's also one that's really, really graphic that you'll love. The entire poster is just a picture of somebody's back with Shame spelled out in cum. On their back.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's pretty amazing. I love when you look at a poster and just instantly it's, wow, that's offensive. I'm going to watch the movie.
Yeah, that is officially, when people, cum art, I feel like,
right.
Cum art is always offensive. Not offensive, but it's one of those things where I don't know.
It makes a statement immediately.
Well, to take the time to artistically put cum in places,
Sure. So it's the artistry that draws you into something like that.
It's the artistic fortitude is what it is. It'd be like if somebody were to make art out of vomit.
Well, it could also be Elmer's glue, but
they're
the
not
imagery.
Biological paint.
I guess that carries over to the actual film. I certainly wasn't disappointed to find that, okay, visual aesthetic is going to be very, very important in Shame. The way the shots are set up and keeping the characters in the end of the frame.
Yeah.
When you're talking about a 2-3-5 to 1 shot, your character is basically, if he takes a step backwards, he disappears from the line of sight of the movie. And, they're doing a lot of these scenes that were probably hard to track doing that. All the running scenes, there's, I can think of at least 2 scenes with the character running, keeping right in the end of the frame. That sort of distance that's in there, I think that's going to add a lot to the isolation the characters feel. That it says a lot, I guess, about the distance they're putting up,
right?
Kind of making you consider that. And just as we talked about with Silence of the Lambs way back, when they betray those ideas, that'll say just the opposite. Going back through and watching Shame and looking for the scenes where a character is centered, when Sissy's on stage, or right after the scenes with Nicole, seeing our character centered in the middle of the frame. Definitely a different place, a different headspace that character's in than running down the street,
right?
Distancing himself from stuff. I look at that aesthetic a lot because of the subtlety of this movie.
This is one of the most subtle films we've ever covered on Double Feature.
You think so?
I do. Well, I think because, and I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with our typical taste because I don't think that plays into it.
Sure.
But this is one of those few films where a single line seems like it accidentally fell into a movie.
Yeah.
And it carries all the weight of the film. It's one of those films where a line is dropped almost as an afterthought in the conversation, but it provides a massive amount of insight into the characters' backgrounds and the motivation for everything that's been going on.
Well, it's subtext, right?
Right.
I mean, that's, the very definition. You're questioning every single line and going, how does this inform the situation? What are they feeding us right now?
Right.
It's especially impressive to me being a drama and not a mystery or science fiction. The kind of way we would pour over something like Primer.
Right.
And look at every single line of Primer and go, what is this, what variable is this in the math equation of Primer to help us solve this? You would then rewatch Primer and go, oh, now I understand what he means by this or this.
Right.
And I think that's something Shame does really well, especially given that it's nowhere near any of those genres.
Right.
You look at a scene like when he's beat up in that post-bar fight, and, they're showing a little bit of the time shifting with the scar. And he's denied from that first club.
Yeah, and they don't just say, like, don't come in. They say, not tonight.
Not tonight, right. And, then he goes to the gay bar and immediately gets to have sex.
Sure.
Because when you line up at a gay bar, that's... Yeah, I mean, it's actually probably a sex club. So
it's a gay sex club.
Won't give the movie crap for the idea that you could just go to any gay bar and get laid immediately.
Yeah. I understand.
So why do you think that is?
Why do I think
the not tonight?
I think the information given is that maybe he gets so self-deprecating in these moments of, where he goes to a bar and intentionally hits on a woman. He doesn't give a shit that she has a man. And if you think of something like a nightclub, I have the inside scoop on nightclubs, let me tell you.
Sure. Back in the day when you were a bouncer for a nightclub.
Yeah.
A job I still don't believe you had.
People will get thrown out of nightclubs for the dumbest shit just because, basically because of fear of mom mentality, right?
Sure.
Where you have this person who's instigating a fight and you throw out not only the guy who starts the fight, you throw out everybody involved.
Right.
Even if they were innocent, even if they got hit and knocked down and their nose is bleeding and they were just a random punch that was thrown. If their nose is bleeding, they were involved in the fight, you get them the fuck out. Well, if somebody does that 2 weekends in a row, you're going to remember them.
Yeah.
You're going to tell them not to come in. You're going to, profile them as a troublemaker. And the fact that he says not tonight instead of not anymore is interesting because I'm trying to think, are they waiting for him to cool down? I mean,
well, so he looks a little beat up, and that was the first thing I thought is, oh, he looks rough. They tell him not tonight. But, here's what we know about this character's history. Has some kind of what I guess on the surface you could describe as sexual addiction.
Yeah.
So let's assume this is some kind of sex club. He's going in and he's not thinking straight. He's had a couple drinks at this other bar. He just got in a fight. He's a little bit rough. He's stumbling around. And they're letting what in my memory, I mean, I'll have to see it again, but is exclusively women into this club.
Right.
So this could be, a sex club having a girls' night. Or, I mean, it's weird to specifically say not tonight, but that's one of those things, you rewatch it and you get more context for it.
Sure.
We've gotten really deep into this without talking about what the hell this movie is. This is a Steve McQueen movie who did Hunger. He's bringing us an NC-17 movie, so it's really important we know his name.
I love NC-17, man.
But also Michael Fassbender, who we've discussed a lot on the show.
Fassbender.
I know, right?
That's the reason I wanted to see the movie. Completely
Sure,
honestly,
totally.
is films starring Michael Fassbender. That's a genre for me.
Well, and also in a difficult role.
Sure.
Anything as sexual as this can be really challenging,
Mm-hmm.
even aside from how much nudity there is.
Sure. Well, it's easy to take a role with this kind of depth and get carried away with the torment of the character.
Yeah, right.
It's difficult to really play a broad role on somebody who's on paper is, yeah, he had a rough childhood and now he's a sex addict.
Sure.
Imagine Nicolas Cage playing this role, right? He would look at everyone like he was hungry and he would probably be masturbating the entire movie.
Sure. Well, it's small drama, very few characters. It reminds me of when we talked about Hard Candy.
Yeah.
We're spending so much time in a single place where we're relying on 3 people to carry the whole story, and we have to be infatuated with them. And that's about what we have here. We also have Sissy, who's Carey Mulligan, who we
Right.
saw in Drive.
Yeah.
And I think the relationship between the two of them is, I mean, it is at the core of the film.
Sure.
It's also one of the ways we learn a lot about the characters is by looking at, that's what made me think about that 2 sides of the same coin idea.
Sure.
Seeing how they, knowing they had the same upbringing, seeing how they react to different things,
Right.
or what, I guess even more so, what the major conflicts in their life are, because they're
Yeah.
in very different places.
Sure, but you can look at the 2 characters and ostensibly from the way the film is lined up and from the other small one-off lines that we get, what's the line that Sissy says? We're not bad people.
Oh yeah, on the voicemail in the end. Well, that's one of the most revealing things, right?
Exactly. And
we just come from a bad place.
Right, and it's kind of this examination of 2 characters who, regardless of even the entirety of their previous lives, there's some point, some catalytic moment, like a big bang, where they got sent off spinning in 2 completely different directions, but
Sure.
from the same origin.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how pointed an answer it gives us. But
Right.
we definitely know, all right, we're dealing with some kind of sexual baggage.
Sure.
Even if it's just, even if that's only the symptom.
To me, I didn't necessarily think it was definitely sexual. It definitely has to do with, either, I don't know, not being loved or getting beaten as a kid. But I think that the most important thing to know about the 2 characters is that they weren't estranged this
Right.
whole time. They
Right.
come from the same place.
Sure.
And that's a dark place. At some point, they both hit a very dark moment. And that is something that they both base the entirety of their life choices on.
Yeah, I don't think that that catalyst you're talking about is necessarily sexual in nature.
Right.
It's just for Brandon, that's, how it's
Yeah.
manifested itself.
Exactly.
That's kind of where his baggage is.
Exactly.
But I mean, it could be anything to do with the area they grew up,
Mhm.
all the way to the other side of the spectrum, adult abuse, sexual abuse,
Sure.
something with their parents, their family.
Sure.
But you look at Brandon and his reaction to this, and the thing that makes me feel like it's really family involved is he runs from everything family related.
Yeah.
He both literally the running, getting back to the aesthetic of the film and some of the kind of the metaphorical ideas it's playing
Right.
with. But, his interactions with people who aren't Sissy. I mean, he has this dinner with Nicole.
Mhm.
Another great scene where every single line is, just full of information.
Right.
But he goes on to develop a little bit. He talks about how he can't possibly understand the value of family.
Sure.
But they hit it off and they hang out again. And, he's trying to change a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He has sex with her or tries to have sex with her. It's the only time I think the only time in the movie we see him fail sexually.
Right.
And that comes back to him attempting to change and not being able to associate sexuality with intimacy.
Right.
Which is, I guess, one of the reasons that I think, there could have been some kind of sexual event in his past. But not necessarily. I mean, it could just have to do with family.
Right.
It could just be his inability to think or concentrate or get close to somebody
Right.
when he knows that this is a woman who's invested in family. He's thinking about
Right.
the family unit.
Exactly.
And then you can contrast that to Sissy, who she also seems like she's trying to change, but her primary motivation is just survival.
Mm-hmm.
Her conflict isn't trying to get over things so much as,
Yeah.
I think she just wants to be around Brandon.
Well, I think that Brandon to her represents whatever these two have lost, Brandon represents that to her. Whether it's somebody who's been there, somebody who, if they've grown up together, if she's to go back through her history of human contact, she can definitely ascribe Brandon as someone who was there for her and there with her, because as a brother, you're in the same fucking house growing up.
Yeah, right.
You're going through the same shit. It's the support system between siblings is one of the strongest that you really ever run into.
Right. Well, and it seems like now she's trying her best to entangle herself in his life.
Right.
Going back to their past, he's probably the only one who really understands what they were going through, especially if it was within their own family.
Yeah.
Something like an abusive parent. She might feel like he's the only one who understands.
Yeah.
And here he is running from everything family, which includes Sissy, that reminder of his own family. And she's just, she fucks his boss. She's trying to just get her talons and
right.
Just grip into his life in any way that, I'll start a reoccurring sexual fling with your boss so I have an excuse to talk to you and see you and be involved in your life. That also makes me think about what their history with each other is.
Right.
It's one of those things, like, the movie's called Shame.
Mm-hmm.
It deals with a lot of sexual issues. And there's that saying, what is it? It's something to the effect of, when you have a hammer, every problem is a nail.
Yeah.
I start to question if there's sexual past between the two of them.
Sure.
But I don't know if I'm doing that just because we're talking a lot about sex and about family problems.
Well, but I think that that tactic would not be beyond the subtlety of the film. To talk about sex a whole bunch and never talk about the sexual event that would occur, because by implanting sex as a major motivation for the film, you automatically start trying to figure out the sexual nature of each character.
Sure. Do you think there's anything to that? Do we have any kind of evidence or indication one way or another if the two of them had any sexual history?
Well, I want to say that. I want to say that the film is kind of pointing toward them having a sexual history, because if you look at the two characters, you can look at them like two pieces of a puzzle. And if you are to try to find the one character that the film presents us with that seems to fit all the problems that the other character has, you just put Sissy and Brandon together and you realize that, well, first there's the moment where Sissy wants to sleep in the same bed as Brandon.
Sure.
And her treatment of that is almost along the lines of just like we used to.
Right. Again, don't know if I should read into that sexually or if I should go, she's reverting back to, their childhood state.
Yeah. And the other reason that makes me think that there's definitely some sexual history there is it's compounded on top of the fact that Brandon is a sex addict.
Yeah.
And oftentimes sex addiction, while people will attribute it to troubled past and whatever, and that can exacerbate an issue, I feel like sexual addiction is something that you deal with kind of your whole life.
Yeah.
And I use addiction not in the, in quotations.
Sure.
Addiction. You like having sex a lot. You have a very, very intense sex drive.
Yeah.
And so I could see Brandon being the type of person that maybe a little bit younger, having the type of issues he does, he would, in a moment of weakness, be open to a situation where he has sex with his sister.
Sure.
And that gets compounded when she walks in on him masturbating.
Yeah, right.
And he goes off on her at a level that doesn't seem rational.
Sure.
Unless he's pushing very hard against something that's already happened or that he's afraid will happen again.
That's one of the most enigmatic moments for me, because to look at how the two characters react to that.
Sure.
He gets really upset.
Yeah.
But she walks away from the door smiling.
Yeah.
She walks away from the door. It's, I don't want to try and read into it too much.
Sure.
But it could be possible that they had some sexual moment when they were younger, and she's trying to return to that after he's rejected her.
Sure.
After maybe he's realized, that this is a taboo,
Sure.
not on double feature will I call it an awful thing, but
Right.
you know what I mean, societally
Yeah.
a terrible thing that they've done.
Sure.
He steers away from her and tries to avoid her, and she's trying to rekindle, just make any connection back in his life.
Right. Well, and if you look at the other thing that's going on in Brandon's life, where with the at the office with the virus and the checking through hard drives or whatever,
right.
you already get this glimpse that Brandon is not comfortable owning up to his own sexuality, because I understand the professional repercussions of looking at porn at work, but he's willing to throw somebody else under the bus. He's not
Right.
He doesn't have a handle on his own needs.
Sure.
And it's not the kind of thing where, oh man, he's so fucked up and he needs sex so bad he'll get a blowjob from a dude. He doesn't even give a shit.
Right.
He is doing it and already aware that he's ashamed of having to do it. For whatever reason, he's trying to fill a need that he's ashamed he even has.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that seems like him swinging back so hard against Sissy.
Sure.
It's just a sign that he feels like he did something very wrong, or he is very wrong.
Right.
And he's not comfortable owning up to it.
Yeah, I guess now that I think about it, there's kind of a lot of moments between the two of them.
Yeah.
I mean, he walks into his apartment and sees her in the shower. There's just a long scene. It's very natural for them.
Sure.
I want to say he sniffs her clothes at some point.
There's the moment where she's singing, where he's clearly, the camera lingers on him in a way where he's thinking something very, he's mulling something over very, very important.
Sure.
And whether it's, oh my God, I'm glad my sister's back, or I want to fuck her so hard, this is terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible thinking now that, people might listen to this conversation and never have even considered sexual history between the two of them.
Right.
I mean, it also says a lot, I guess, about having a preconceived narrative and looking for evidence of that thing.
Sure.
It also shouldn't go unsaid that that's an incredible scene, that little singing lounge.
Yeah.
That was a single take, that scene.
Yeah.
The song about New York, special attention to the city. The movie all over is just full of New York stuff. I mean, all the floor-to-ceiling windows.
Sure.
The infamous hotel, The Standard, which is where they're fucking later in the...
Right.
I don't know if you kind of know the story about The Standard.
I don't.
It's a fairly new hotel, and it's infamous for patrons fucking in the windows and people watching from the street. Which, I mean, what more perfect thing to include in a sexual portrait of New York City? It's just one of those things that, aside from all this character-driven stuff that Shame does, it's special attention to visuals and to, I guess, to the city itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting look at New York. We should probably talk about Ji-woon Kim right away in talking about I Saw the Devil.
I know. Okay, so he's a director where I know his work and have just been I've been a poor film guy and neglected all of it. I just add it all to my Netflix queue and say I'll get around to it, and then meanwhile,
well, you've
watch.
mentioned The Good, the Bad, the Weird.
The Good, the Bad, and the Weird
so many times on the show.
Yeah.
And I know you've seen A Tale of Two Sisters, haven't you?
Yes, that's true. I have seen that one.
That's another big one that's escaped our show thus far, but people write to us about that one all the time. He also directed one of the segments for... You remember Takashi Miike did 3 Extremes?
Yes.
Takashi Miike, another director we've talked about a lot. I guess there was a sequel to 3 Extremes that he did one for.
All right.
Probably the weirdest thing from his filmography, though, is The Last Stand.
Yeah, the Schwarzenegger... Who is that? Schwarzenegger and...
Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah, Johnny Knoxville. Okay.
Even weirder than anything we just said is that neither you nor I have seen The Last Stand.
Yeah, I didn't realize it came out.
Oh my God.
I've been under a rock, man.
Yeah, seriously. I thought it's really funny that this movie, it starts with that Showbox cartoony ping pong ball guy for the studio logos.
Yeah.
Just way inappropriate for the film. And then that cheery peppermint logo that comes up. The film has the heavy task then of immediately setting the tone, setting the mood to be something a lot darker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that says a lot about how I feel about the film right there. It has this constant contrast of light moments and dark moments and kind of a strange sense of humor that it has.
Right.
We get this setup and it's dark and the woman's alone in the car. And then it cuts to a super bright room that Kim's in, which feels very safe.
Sure.
As I'm watching those scenes, you know, it's a hard thing to do because that might break the tension for the audience.
Right.
But I really like going back to the safe, brightly lit room with lots of police force in it. Makes me feel like everything's going to be okay. And, you know, the movie betrays that. We get our blood in the snow. We get to see the killer.
Right.
And that's one of those things that's really going to change our perspective on a movie like this. Kim immediately moves into these vigilante, you know, elements. And as he's going around attacking these usual suspects, we know he's wrong about the first few.
Right.
Kind of gets your mind working on the themes in advance. That sort of, is this the right thing to do?
Right.
Is this guy a monster? You know, we see him making the wrong move.
Sure. Well, I think it started off with me thinking this is going to be something like Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
And then as it went on, it felt a little bit more like Taken. And I was thinking about those two movies and what kind of similarities one could draw to make a continuous point with the two films. And I think that one of the things that those films have in common and that I Saw the Devil brings serious light to is, when is it okay to hurt people, and what is
Sure.
at what point do you kind of go, well, they're a criminal, that's fine, you know, because Silence of the Lambs is, he's a criminal, but we can use him on this one.
Sure.
And then Taken with the obvious, he's just beating the shit out of everybody.
Right.
And I feel like I Saw the Devil really early on in the film calls into question the morality of every character except for his fiancée.
Sure.
I think she is the only character who we can just assume is entirely good and righteous and didn't deserve this. And is it okay for somebody to basically bastardize that and be a horrible person to get revenge?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so we look at our killer and we look at Kim, and those are examples of considering what is a monster, what is a villain,
who is the devil,
who is the devil, right? And that's one of the areas of contrast that's different than, say, the film's humor, or, you know, when I say humor, I mean the film has this very measured sense of grief, and it's preceded by her head stumbling and rolling out of the box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just these ways it can play off. It can try and have a little bit of fun, but also consider a very serious thing.
Sure.
And it lets us kind of have our horror fun and look good doing it, look like we're making a serious, noble artistic consideration.
Right.
But I think it also accomplishes, you know, it lets Kim beat the killer to death over and over, and we don't question his survival.
Sure.
It's in those repeated beatings that we keep getting this examination. You know, that's one of the unique things it does, is we have our revenge moment early on where he beats the killer to death.
Right.
And then the killer kind of just gets back up. And so at first we just go through one cinematic circle. We go through, oh yeah, I know this. This is a revenge movie. I've seen revenge movies.
Sure. Let's
all celebrate Kim, you know, beating this guy senseless and getting his retribution the first time.
Right.
But as we keep getting that over and over, I think that's one of the things that kind of, I don't want to keep calling it a sense of humor, but you know what I mean? The movie's superhuman kind of sensibility about these characters allows it to do.
Sure.
Let's look at our killer first.
Uh-huh.
What's his deal?
He's to contrast him to somebody like Brandon from Shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is a one-dimensional, horrible person. But it's amazing to watch a character who you think, well, what would a horrible person do? And this guy does it and then does one step better.
Yeah.
He's fresh up off the operating table and decides to rape a nurse.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This guy has no qualms, and everybody who knows him, the cannibal guy even.
Sure.
So we have a character who eats human flesh 3 times a day, 3 square meals of human meat. That's what I eat because it's tasty.
Yeah.
And he's afraid of this guy.
Sure.
You know?
Well, it's also interesting because we spend so much time with the killer.
Right.
We're really doing kind of a 50-50 thing. So it wants to give us ample room to, I mean, not only have fun following him around and enjoy, you know, seeing that character, but also to go, look, we're really going to give you every sense of what this guy's thinking and doing.
Right.
And you're never going to see redemption in him.
Sure.
We're going to prove over and over, you know, the thing with the nurse, the 360 car stab.
Right.
Every
so
single
good.
thing. Yeah, everything he does it just leads back to that this person is a monster.
Right.
But I like in that moment with the nurse, I love, Kim and him fight, and he grabs the blade and squeezes.
Yeah.
He just does not give a fuck. He looks insane.
Yeah.
Which is how the movie's trying to start painting him at that point.
Sure.
It's this awakening to the audience of, well, wait a second, how do we feel about Kim?
Sure.
Because I think there's also room to think, in the beginning at least, that Kim shows up every time this guy is committing some act of rape and murder, almost like he's conditioning him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I totally get that.
Because he doesn't kill him right away.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, well, what's the reason? Why does he let this guy live?
Sure.
What's going on here? And then the guy will go to rape somebody, and he'll swoop in at the last second, beat the fuck out of him, and then just disappear.
Sure.
Like maybe he's correcting him or something.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this film calls into question the idea of murder for revenge, or even eye for an eye. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You take something like a murder, and then you take the person who is hurt most deeply by the murder, and you let them single-handedly kill the person who killed the person that was dear to them.
Right.
And then you get that thing that everybody always fucking says in film and in real life, killing them won't bring her back.
Yeah.
And so at what point do you get the purest revenge where you feel like this redeems the loss of that human being?
Sure.
It kind of, for me, brings up the whole idea of capital punishment. Is slaughtering this person going to make them a better person?
Right.
Is it going to change what happened? You know what I mean?
Well, that's the most direct question, right? Because no is the answer. It's
no,
not going to change what happens.
The answer is always no. You're not going to
Right.
change what happened. So the best thing you can do, and this is why I'm really glad you brought up the conditioning thing, and this is what our fucking correctional system is supposed to be doing, right? Is to take the person that did it, show them, prove to them, make them realize what they did was the wrong thing to do, and then put them back on the street.
Sure.
As a person who did a horrible thing and realizes it was horrible and wishes that it would never happen again, and then you get a race of wonderful people, right? That's what's supposed to happen.
Sure.
So what do you do when you have to classically condition a guy to get his Achilles tendon sliced whenever he has forced sexual...
Sure.
If that guy doesn't get conditioned, is it then okay to go, okay, we have sliced this guy's Achilles tendon when he tried to rape a girl. We have broken his hand with a rock.
Right.
And he still doesn't seem to get the picture.
Sure.
So is it now okay to decapitate him in front of his family?
Well, I think the movie also breaks my conditioning hypothesis when you meet the, the meat eater.
Right.
Because he brings up this idea that Zhang's created a hunter out of Kim.
Sure.
Somebody who's just enjoying the thrill of following this guy around and fucking with him. I mean, how much does he really have in common with, that scene, the fucking lodge of psychopaths that I love? They just have some log cam. I mean, is he one of them?
Is Kim one of them?
That seems to be what the cannibal thinks.
There's two ways you can look at it. You can look at it like Kim is the arm of justice, and he will be exacting, and he will get the truest and purest revenge for taking pure innocence away from the earth, right?
Yeah.
You can grandize that as much as you want to.
Sure.
But then you have the flip side of the coin, where it's never okay to kill somebody. It's never okay to, make them step on fish hooks, Kevin McAllister notwithstanding.
Right.
It's a situation where if you are going to start painting Kim as a monster, where on the spectrum of a monster does he lie in comparison with the other people?
Yeah. Well, let me ask the question a little differently, maybe. So rather than asking if he's one of them, this is one of my favorite themes of revenge films. What are the important differences between Kim and, say, Zhang, for instance?
Right. Well, you have the fact that Kim doesn't rape people. And
oftentimes
something like rape is, and it's odd because I can't weigh in as strongly as I'd like to, but something like rape is a far more clear-cut you're a bad person than murder.
Sure.
Think of it like this. If you are on trial for murder, there is actually a situation in which you can convert your plea to something like crime of passion.
Sure.
And you'll get a lighter sentence. If you call rape a crime of passion,
Yes, it's an instant guilty verdict.
yeah.
Yeah, right. I see what you're saying. Sure. Well, and I think a lot of people, I mean, like, I don't want to get into a big thing about it, but I think a lot of people would define rape as being even worse fate than murder.
Sure.
You know, it's one of the worst things a human being can do to another human being.
Oh, no, I'm
I think
not
we could
trying.
at least agree on that.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And so we have.
So, all right. So he's not raping.
Right. And then I guess also we can, as far as we know, he doesn't kill people. He hasn't killed Shang. He won't, he doesn't kill anybody.
Okay, I guess that's also true. He doesn't, if you want to be really pedantic about it. He never kills him. He just sets up an elaborate trap where he'll probably die.
Sure. And then we have the final factor, and this is what I would assume would be the top of everybody else's list, but because you and I are humanists and we don't think, we think a person is a person first and then what they are beyond human, their personality or whatever,
sure.
that's, he only kills bad people. You know what I mean? He kills people who kill people, which something like you take a show like Dexter where the entire premise is it's okay to kill bad people, right?
right.
And that is presented in such a way where you go, well, yeah, because they're going to kill more people. And if one more person,
it's a deterrent.
Yeah. You go, if one more person has to die, if one person's going to die anyway, I'd rather it be the murderer than the innocent victim, right?
But what about the torture aspect of it? I mean, assuming he's not trying to rehabilitate him, which he probably isn't.
I don't think he is. I think he's trying to do exactly what you previously said, where you and I can agree that rape is probably a fate worse than death.
Or at least pretty fucking bad.
Sure.
I don't think anybody will argue that line. Let's go with that.
Let's put it this way. Being raped and murdered is worse than being
just being murdered. Okay, sure.
So if he were to just kill Shang gets off with, haha, I didn't get raped. I just got murdered.
Right.
And Kim isn't just going to rape Shang because then Kim has to live with raping Shang.
So you think this is a more accurate eye for an eye?
I think that is his. I mean, as far as I think the film definitely presents, this is Kim's getting an eye for a rape and murder.
Right.
His fiance was brutally killed. She was sliced up into little pieces. She was raped. All this horrible thing, and this guy is relentless. Yeah. So the only way to make him just feel the level of pain and horror that his victims have felt is to continually murder him time and time again and make him fear that he's going to continually be murdered.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons that I like the concept of, the film showing this guy beaten almost to death so many times, because without actually killing multiple people, it does give the feeling that Kim is just as much a serial killer. We see him essentially kill a guy over and over.
Right.
So that we can more, so it's a little more equal footing as far as trying to equate the two.
Sure.
So, I mean, I guess you have the rape aspect of it. You have the retribution aspect of it. Those are supposed to make him a different kind of monster, if not, not a monster at all. But I feel like, I don't want to say we're grasping at straws for reasons. These are the reasons the film is presenting.
Sure.
But the film just wants you to question the two things. And I look at this as these are pretty two awful, sadistic.
I think they're horrible people. Just terrible people.
Bad people.
I mean, the fact you and I always make jokes about, you take the fucking film's title, right? And you go, who is the, or what is the, or who is the real?
Who is the real devil?
Yeah, exactly. And this film, it wants you to ask that. That is the kind of the point of the film is, who is the real devil? Who saw the devil? Right? Is it the one who awoke the devil in the man whose fiance was killed? Or is it the man who came face to face with somebody who rapes and murders for kicks?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you might even argue that for making Kim into such a monster, Shang's an even worse person
Yeah.
because he could ignite that in somebody. So I guess those reasons are clearly there, and it's for the audience to decide if that
Sure.
really makes this person as horrendous as
Right.
perhaps you and I would come on
Yeah.
here and go, easily. Obviously it does.
Right.
I also like to think, though, that this isn't a revenge film so much as just a film about a man dealing with his grief.
Yeah.
You know, you see him walk away, and that the ending is just spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
Walking away and putting the earbuds in.
Yep.
The only time anybody's ever looked badass putting little earbuds
Yeah,
in and
yeah.
taking a stroll. But, you know, and then he breaks down and you see him look, I mean, enormously human compared
Sure.
to the sadistic bastard he's been. And I start to get this feeling that, oh, it was just about the healing process. This is just how one man gets the heavy weight off of his chest, happens to be by sadistically stalking this serial killer.
Yeah, but then you have to take a look at the trail of bodies that his personal
Sure.
revenge has left.
You're right. You're right.
That's not, I mean, I get it. And he's a total badass, and he came up with a jigsaw-like trap that really stuck it to Shang. But
well, I mean, the other FBI or whatever the fuck
Sure.
they have over there.
yeah.
The other police officials also give him a ton of grief about,
Sure.
you know, because you pursued him like this. Look how many other people he's
Yeah,
killed.
exactly.
And look how he went
It's-
after us, you know, to a
it's-
greater degree.
Yeah, it's not a point that the film doesn't raise itself. The
Right.
film knows every time that he doesn't kill Shang, more people are being victims. They do that
Yeah.
on purpose. The timeline
Sure.
is such that every time Shang gets up, he does some bad shit and then tries to rape somebody.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think, the most effective point that the film makes is if somebody that you love is taken from you the way that Kim's fiance was taken from him, there is no real way to eye for an eye doesn't work.
Except
It just
mauling someone
doesn't
sadistically via a death trap in front of their family.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's at the end of how many other people dying.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with
It's-
you.
And that's where I think that the film kind of lets you think, okay, maybe Shang is the devil, because Shang was a terrible person who got the ball rolling on two demons fighting back and forth.
Yeah, right.
What do you do to try to get revenge for somebody that is taken from you? You can't. And that's what the film says to me, is the film wraps up with this elaborate trap wherein Shang's head is decapitated in front of his son and parents, right?
Yeah.
It is horrible. This is a horrible thing to do to a human being. And I don't feel vindicated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe just for the sake of disagreeing with you here, I also feel like seeing his release after that, doesn't that kind of spell out, hey, this worked for Kim. He finally feels, you know,
Maybe.
vindicated.
Or he's sobbing because he doesn't.
Right. I suppose it could be that.
I mean,
too.
he is, what you have to think about at that moment is he's either, okay, I can finally go to bed tonight, right? I'm
Right.
finally over it. Or he's going, wow, I just killed that guy and subsequently killed about 10 other people, including my only
Sure.
friends and the remainder of my fiance's family. And this wasn't worth it.
So perhaps for you and I, that's a moment of clarity to
Yeah.
realize now the horror that he's.
Yeah.
Also, just haven't seen that kind of sheer brutality since the Joyride Hitcher days
And I'm
on
loving
the show.
Fucking loving
Yeah,
it.
just way to go. I saw the devil. We have a website, which is doublefutureshow.com, and a email address. It's doublefutureshow@gmail.com. Please send us last chance. Help us come up with incentives for Kickstarter. But what are we doing on the show next
So
time?
we're going to do Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Finally.
And we're going to pair that with Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow.
Awesome. Can't wait for that.
Watch more fucking film.
Bye.
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and Michael, I'm really excited to tell you I found a theme for today's show.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, of course
Yeah.
we always have themes because we're a professional podcast and we plan for things way ahead of time.
Professional podcast. So this is, I mean, we did a great thing finally watching these movies.
Mm-hmm.
That was really the only reason I needed, is just I want to watch Shame and I want to watch I Saw the Devil.
Is that the theme? That's a horrible theme.
Well, it would have been a horrible theme, but I think there is a question to consider on today's show, and that is two sides of the same coin.
Ooh. That's
yeah,
really
right.
Good.
You got a little bit of that going.
I like that. Yeah, big time.
So, that's something that may or may not be true in either film, but definitely going to come up in a big way in our conversation on both. So that's going to involve spoiling the movies.
Yeah, we got to spoil them.
For people who've never heard this show before. They can use the chapters, which is a feature we have, to skip over the movie they haven't seen. Other thing I did want to mention before we get into Shame. Shame's the first movie. What's the second movie?
The second movie is I Saw the Devil.
We're on our 600th episode of Double Feature, and I still don't know how we do this. Shame and I Saw the Devil. Yeah, that's
okay. This is episode 600?
Episode 600. Welcome. You've made it.
Cool.
I wanted to mention our Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have one yet.
Nope.
We're going to have more details about why we're doing a Kickstarter, what the incentives are. But for the last time, you as an audience member can have some influence on what those incentives are going to be. So send us an email, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com, and let us know if you're going to make a pledge to Kickstarter, what do you want to get out of it? Besides a chance to pick some movies for our show. I know everybody wants that.
Right.
We figured that into the equation. That's before Kickstarter was even invented.
There's also
that part out.
There's a lot of people that want to see us naked.
doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. Apparently. I'll show you if you show me. Let's talk about Shame.
I think it's a good time for that.
Wow. The first natural segue in a million episodes of the show. So the post-it is going to be very, very important in Shame. The way the shots are set up and, keeping the characters in the end of the frame.
Yeah.
When you're talking about a 2-3-5-1 shot, your character is basically, if he takes a step backwards, he disappears from the line of sight of the movie. And, they're doing a lot of these scenes that were probably hard to track doing that. All the running scenes, there's, I can think of at least 2 scenes with the character running, keeping right in the end of the frame. That sort of distance that's in there, I mean, I think that's going to add a lot to the isolation the characters feel. That it says a lot, I guess, about the distance they're putting up.
Right.
Kind of making you consider that. And just as we talked about with Silence of the Lambs way back, when they betray those ideas, that'll say just the opposite. Going back through and watching Shame and looking for the scenes where a character is centered, when Sissy's on stage, or right after the scenes with Nicole, seeing her character centered in the middle of the frame. Definitely a different place, a different headspace that character's in than running down the street.
Right.
There is what lured me into Shame. Of so many movies we do.
Poster.
Yeah, there's 2 different posters. I don't know if you've seen these actually.
I've seen one that's red and blue. Okay,
I'm talking about, so there's one with the sheets, which is kind of interesting. It says Shame. It shows some bed sheets. It's an interesting poster. Definite, association immediately. But there's also one that's really, really graphic that you'll love. The entire poster is just a picture of somebody's back with Shame spelled out in cum on their back.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's pretty amazing. I love when you look at a poster and just instantly it's wow, that's offensive. I'm gonna watch the movie.
Yeah, that is officially, when people cum art, I feel like cum art is always offensive not offensive, but it's one of those things where I don't know.
It makes a statement immediately.
Well, to take the time to artistically put cum in places. I mean,
so it's the artistry that draws you into something like that.
It's the artistic fortitude is what it is. It'd be like if somebody were to make art out of vomit.
Well, I mean, it could also be Elmer's glue, but
they're
the
not
imagery.
Biological paint.
I guess that carries over to the actual film. I mean, I certainly wasn't disappointed to find that, visual aesthetic, distancing himself from stuff. I look at that aesthetic a lot because of the subtlety of this movie.
This is one of the most subtle films we've ever covered on Double Feature.
You think so?
I do. Well, I think because, and I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with our typical taste because I don't think that plays into it.
Sure.
But this is one of those few films where a single line seems like it accidentally fell into a movie.
Yeah.
and it carries all the weight of the film. It's one of those films where a line is dropped almost as an afterthought in the conversation, but it provides a massive amount of insight into the characters' backgrounds and the motivation for everything that's been going on.
Well, it's subtext, right?
Right.
I mean, that's, the very definition. You're questioning every single line and going, how does this inform the situation? What are they feeding us right now?
Right.
It's especially impressive to me being a drama and not a mystery or science fiction. The kind of way we would pour over something like Primer.
Right.
And look at every single line of Primer and go, what is this, what variable is this in the math equation of Primer to help us solve this? You would then rewatch Primer and go, oh, now I understand what he means by this or this.
Right.
And I